Have you ever noticed how things change the second you start really looking at them? How troubles that felt impossible to handle suddenly become easier to deal with when you actually face them head on. How your relationships with other people transform the moment you become aware of the repeating behaviors happening between you and them. There's something going on here that most folks never catch on to. Something so basic to how our world operates that once you get it, you can never go back to not seeing it. And this isn't some magical idea or spiritual theory. Scientists have tested it in labs. Researchers have written about it. And it is changing everything we believed we understood about how life actually works. The observer effect isn't just some strange thing that shows up when scientists do experiments with tiny particles. It's the secret system that controls how your mind connects with everything around you. And when you really understand what this means, it transforms how you handle your life, your connections with people, your difficulties, and what you are capable of achieving. Just think about this for a moment. Every single second you re-alive, you re-watching, you re-looking at your thoughts, noticing how you feel, paying attention to what is happening around you. But here is the crazy part. When you observe something, you're not just sitting there doing nothing. You're not like someone just watching a movie about your own life. You're actually taking part in making what you were going through happen. Most people go through their days completely unaware of this. They believe reality is something that just happens to them. Something that is already set in stone that they can only respond to. But that's not the way it really works. Reality is something that happens alongside you, flows through you, exists because you re-aware of it. And this isn't just deep thinking or guessing. This is something you can measure, see, and test over and over again in real experiments. When scientists first found the observer effect, they were looking at particles smaller than anything you can imagine. They discovered something that went against everything that made sense, everything they thought they knew about how things work. These tiny particles would act in completely different ways depending on whether someone was looking at them or not. When someone watched them, they acted like solid pieces of matter. When nobody was watching, they acted like waves of energy. Just the simple act of looking was changing what these things actually were at the most basic level. But here is where this gets really interesting. This isn't something that only happens in some tiny world that has nothing to do with your regular life. The same rules that control these super small particles also control everything else, including you. Including what you think, including what you go through, including the reality you reliving in at this very moment. You've seen this happen in your own life, even if you never realized the connection. Think back to a time when you were dealing with something difficult, maybe problems with someone close to you or a personal struggle. You kept thinking about it, stressing about it, but never really taking a good, hard look at what was actually going on. It felt enormous, too much to handle, like there was no way to fix it. But then one day, you chose to actually study what was happening. You sat down and really examined the situation. You looked at the repeating patterns, the back and forth behaviors, the real issues underneath everything, and something changed. The problem didn't. It just vanished, but it transformed. It became clearer, easier to manage, something you could actually work with. That is the observer effect working in your life. Your awareness, your consciousness, your act of really looking actually changed what you were going through. This happens constantly, but most people brush it off as random chance or good timing, or just how life naturally goes. They don't understand they re-seeing one of the most important truths about reality. That consciousness and experience aren't two separate things. They reconnected, they depend on each other, they always affecting each other in ways that most people never pay attention to. Now, I understand what you might be thinking. This sounds too perfect, too easy, too convenient to be real. If watching things really does change reality, then why isn't everybody just watching their way to amazing lives? Why do people still have a hard time, still hurt, still feel trapped in the same old patterns they can't seem to break free from? That is exactly what we need to dig into here. Because getting the observer effect isn't just about knowing it. It's real. It's about getting how it actually works, why it works the way it does, and most importantly, how to use it the right way instead of fighting against it. The first thing that got to understand is that observation isn't the same as just looking at something. It's not the same as just paying attention. Real observation needs a special kind of awareness. It needs you to be present. It needs you to be clear. And it needs you to be willing to see things exactly as they are, not as you want them to be, or as you scared they might be. Most people believe they re-observing when what they really doing is just thinking about stuff. They breaking things down, making judgments, comparing one thing to another, trying to figure out what it all means. But that is not observation. That is your mind being busy. That is your brain doing what it is best at, which is making up stories, coming up with explanations, and creating interpretations about everything. Real observation happens when you step away from all that mental chatter and just watch what is actually going on. When you watch your thoughts without getting pulled into them, when you notice your feelings without letting them take over, when you see the patterns in how you act without immediately jumping in to try to change them. This kind of observation needs a special kind of awareness. It needs you to be present, to be right here, to be aware of what is happening right now, instead of being lost in thoughts about what happened before or worries about what might happen later. And this is where most people have trouble, because being present is something we naturally do. We retrain to live in our heads, to constantly think about things, to analyze and plan and worry and hope. We retaught that thinking is how we solve problems, how we make choices, how we get through life. But thinking by itself can tap into the observer effect. Because thinking is about doing something, and observing is about just being. When you truly observing, you are not trying to change anything. You are not trying to fix anything. You are not trying to figure anything out. You are simply watching what is here, what is happening, what is real in this moment. And that watching, that pure awareness, that is what makes the shift happen. But here, it's where it gets complicated. The second you try to use observation like a tool to get something, to change something, to fix something, you not observing anymore. You trying to manipulate things. You trying to control what happens. And control is the exact opposite of observation. This is why so many people get frustrated when they first learn about the observer effect. They think it's going to be like a magic trick they can do to instantly change their lives. They start observing their problems, expecting them to go away. They start watching their patterns, expecting them to change right away. But that is not how it works. The observer effect is a method you can use. It is not a plan. It is not something you do to get certain results. It is something that happens naturally when you truly present, truly aware, truly willing to see what is actually here instead of what you think should be here. And when this happens, when you in that state of pure observation, reality becomes flexible, not in some magical, mystical way, but in a very real, concrete way. You start seeing choices you didn't see before. You start noticing patterns you were blind to before. You start understanding how things work that were completely invisible to you before. Problems that seemed impossible to solve suddenly show you their answers. Relationships that felt stuck suddenly show you where the real problems are. Patterns that seemed like they would never change suddenly become changeable. Not because you trying to change them, but because your awareness of them creates room for them to shift naturally. This is what happens when consciousness meets reality, without your mind getting in the way, without the distortion of trying to control what happens, without the limitation of believing that things have to stay the way they've always been. But there's something else going on here that is even deeper and more life-changing. When you really observing, you not just changing what is happening around you, you changing what is happening inside you too. You changing how you relate to your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences, your sense of who you are. Most people think they are exactly the same as their thoughts and feelings. They believe they are their thoughts. They convince they are their emotions. But when you observing, you start to see that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who is aware of your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the one who is experiencing your emotions. This change in how you see yourself, this understanding of yourself as the one who is watching rather than the thing being watched, is probably the most life-changing part of understanding the observer effect. Because once you see that you are not your thoughts, you stop letting them control you. Once you get that you are not your emotions, You stop letting them overwhelm you. You start to see that thoughts come and go. Emotions rise and fall. Experiences happen and pass. But the observer, the awareness, the consciousness that is watching all of this, that stays the same. That is who you really are. That is what has always been there underneath all the mental activity, underneath all the emotional drama, underneath all the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what your life means. And from that place of pure awareness, from that understanding of yourself as the observer, everything becomes possible. Not because you can control everything, but because you no longer controlled by anything. You free to respond instead of just react, free to choose instead of having choices made for you, free to create instead of being created by whatever is happening around you. This is just the start of understanding how the observer effect changes everything about your reality. Because once you get these basics, once you start experiencing what it means to truly observe, you begin to see that reality is far more flexible, far more responsive to consciousness than you ever thought possible. The implications of this go way beyond personal change. They touch every part of human experience, from the way we connect with each other to the way we understand the nature of existence itself. And that is exactly what we're going to explore in the next part of this series. The observer effect reveals something that most people spend their whole lives running away from. The truth that you are not separate from your reality. You are not a victim of circumstances, trapped by your genes, limited by your past, or doomed to repeat the same patterns forever. You are an active participant in the creation of your experience, whether you know it or not. But here is what's really disturbing about this truth. It means you can't blame anyone else for your reality anymore. You can point to your childhood, your relationships, your job, your bank account, or any outside factor, and say that it's why your life is the way it is. Because the moment you truly observe any situation, you become a co-creator of it. This scares people because it's easier to believe you powerless than to accept that you have more influence over your reality than you ever imagined. It's more comfortable to think that change is impossible than to face the fact that transformation is available in every moment of conscious observation. Most people would rather stay stuck in familiar suffering than step into the unknown territory of genuine awareness. They'd rather complain about their problems than observe them. They'd rather analyze their patterns than witness them. They'd rather think about their lives than actually live them. But you, different. You here, reading this, because something inside you knows there is more that is possible. Something inside you realizes that the way you've been dealing with reality ISN to working. Something inside you is ready to stop being someone who just watches their life happen and start being someone who actively takes part in creating it. The observer effect ISN to just about changing what is happening around you. It's about completely changing your relationship with existence itself. When you truly get that your consciousness shapes your experience, everything changes. You stop looking for happiness and success in outside things and start finding it in awareness. You stop trying to find peace in perfect situations and start discovering it in present moment observation. You realize that every moment is a chance to observe, to witness, to be aware. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to practice pure observation. Every relationship becomes a mirror showing you back your level of consciousness. Every emotion becomes a teacher showing you where your awareness is clouded or clear. This is why the observer effect changes everything. Because once you see that reality responds to consciousness, you can unsee it. Once you experience what it means to truly observe, you can go back to unconscious living. Once you taste the freedom that comes from being the observer rather than the observed, you can settle for being trapped by your thoughts and emotions anymore. The world needs people who understand this. People who know that consciousness and reality are not separate things. People who can observe without judging, witness without getting attached, and be present without trying to control what happens. People who can hold space for transformation without forcing it, who can see patterns without being trapped by them, who can experience emotions without being overwhelmed by them. This is what is possible when you truly grasp the observer effect. Not just personal transformation, but a complete shift in how you relate to existence itself. You become someone who can navigate chaos with clarity, who can find peace in uncertainty, who can create from awareness rather than react from fear. The observer effect is not just a scientific phenomenon. as a doorway into a completely different way of being human, a way that is more conscious, more present, more alive, a way that recognizes the profound connection between awareness and experience, between consciousness and reality. And once you step through that doorway, once you start living from that place of conscious observation, you become part of the solution to humanity, its greatest challenges, because the problems we face, individually and collectively, all come from the same source, the illusion that we re-separate from our reality, that we re-victims of circumstances, that we re-powerless to create real change. But the observer effect reveals the truth. We are not separate. We are not victims. We are not powerless. We are conscious beings, capable of observing our reality in ways that transform it. And that transformation starts with you in this moment, with your willingness to truly observe what is here, instead of what you think should be here. The observer effect changes everything about your reality, because it reveals that you and your reality were never separate in the first place. You are not just observing your life, you are creating it moment by moment through the quality of your awareness. And when you finally understand this, when you finally step into the fullness of conscious observation, everything becomes possible. So here we are at the end of this journey, but really, it's just the beginning. You've learned something that most people will never understand. They discovered that the observer effect isn't just some fancy science concept that has nothing to do with your daily life. It's the most practical, most powerful tool you'll ever have for creating the reality you actually want to live in. Maybe you were dealing with problems that felt too big to handle. Maybe you were stuck in patterns that seemed impossible to break. Maybe you were feeling like life was just happening to you, and there was nothing you could do about it. But now you know different. Now you know that every single moment gives you the chance to observe, to witness, to be aware. And in that observation, everything can change. This isn't about positive thinking or wishful thinking or trying to convince yourself that problems don't exist. This is about something much deeper and much more real. It is about understanding that you and your reality are not separate things. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are not trapped by your past. You are not doomed to keep repeating the same patterns forever. You are a conscious being with the power to observe your reality in ways that transform it. The observer effect shows you that consciousness and experience are connected. They depend on each other. They are always affecting each other. When you truly observe something, you are not just watching it happen. You are participating in creating it. And that participation, that conscious involvement in your own experience, that is what makes real change possible. They learned that real observation isn't the same as thinking about things. It is not analyzing or judging or trying to figure everything out. Real observation is pure awareness. It is being present. It is watching what is actually happening right now without trying to change it, without trying to control it, without trying to make it into something else. And you discovered something even more important. You learned that you are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not your experiences. You are the one who is aware of all these things. You are the observer. And from that place of pure awareness, everything becomes possible, not because you can control everything, but because you are no longer controlled by anything. This changes everything about how you live. Every challenge becomes a chance to practice observation. Every relationship becomes a mirror showing you your level of consciousness. Every emotion becomes a teacher showing you where your awareness is clear or clouded. Every moment becomes an opportunity to create from awareness instead of reacting from fear. The world needs people who understand this. People who know that we are not separate from our reality. People who can observe without judgment, witness without attachment, and be present without trying to control outcomes. People who can hold space for transformation without forcing it. People who can see patterns without being trapped by them. You are not just observing your life. You are creating it moment by moment through the quality of your awareness. And when you finally understand this, when you finally step into the fullness of conscious observation, everything becomes possible. The observer effect changes everything about your reality because it reveals that you and your reality were never separate in the first place. Your journey into conscious creation starts now. Every moment is a new opportunity to observe, to witness, to be aware. Welcome to a completely different way of being human. Which hit you harder, learning you, not your thoughts, or realizing you recreating your reality through awareness? Let me know in the comments. If you found this video useful, please like it and subscribe to the channel. There are more videos on this channel that will help you become a better version of yourself.